Ozempic, Wegovy, diabetes, blood sugar, metabolic health is suddenly everywhere. But to understand any of it, you first need to understand the fuel system underneath, how your body turns food into energy, and the one hormone at the center of it all. This series is a plain language tour of diabetes, obesity, and metabolic health. A quick note first, this is educational, not medical advice. Today, the foundation, metabolism and blood sugar. Let's start with the word everyone uses and few define, metabolism. Your metabolism is simply the sum of all the chemical reactions that keep you alive, and the most important of them is converting the food you eat into energy your cells can actually use. When you eat, your digestive system breaks food down into basic building blocks. Carbohydrates, in particular, get broken down into glucose, a simple sugar that dissolves into your bloodstream and travels to every cell in your body. Glucose is your body's main quick fuel, the gasoline that powers your muscles and, especially, your brain. So blood sugar just means the amount of glucose circulating in your blood at any moment. Keeping that level in a healthy range, hour by hour, is what this whole system is built to do. Now meet the star of the entire series, insulin. Here's the crucial thing, glucose can't just wander into your cells on its own. It needs a key to unlock the door. That key is insulin, a hormone made by your pancreas, a small organ tucked behind your stomach. Picture the sequence. You eat a meal, glucose floods into your blood, and your blood sugar rises. Your pancreas senses that rise and releases insulin. The insulin travels around and unlocks your cells, letting the glucose move out of the blood and into the cells to be burned for energy or stored for later. As the glucose moves in, your blood sugar comes back down to normal. Insulin is the master regulator that keeps blood sugar from swinging too high. Almost everything that goes wrong in diabetes is a breakdown in this one elegant system. What's beautiful about this system is that it's a constant, automatic balancing act. Your body works hard to keep blood sugar within a fairly narrow range, not too high, not too low. When blood sugar rises after eating, insulin brings it down. When blood sugar drops, say when you haven't eaten for a while, other hormones tell your liver to release its stored glucose to bring it back up. This happens seamlessly, around the clock, without you ever thinking about it. And the reason your body guards this range so carefully is that both extremes are dangerous. Blood sugar that stays too high, for years, silently damages blood vessels and organs. That's the core problem in diabetes. Blood sugar that drops too low starves the brain and can cause collapse. Stability is the whole game. So now you can understand exactly what diabetes is. Diabetes is what happens when this insulin system breaks down, and it breaks in one of two ways. Either the pancreas can no longer make enough insulin, there aren't enough keys, or the body's cells stop responding properly to the insulin that is there, so the keys no longer turn in the locks. We'll spend the next episode on that crucial difference. But either way, the result is the same. Glucose can't get into the cells, so it builds up in the bloodstream instead, and blood sugar runs chronically, dangerously high. The cells, meanwhile, are starving in a sea of fuel they can't access. That, in one sentence, is diabetes, and everything else in this series builds on it. This is educational, not medical advice. Here's something that confuses almost everyone. Type 1 and type 2 diabetes share a name and a symptom, high blood sugar, but they are fundamentally two different diseases, with different causes, different patients, and different treatments. Lumping them together causes real misunderstanding and real stigma. So let's clearly separate them, because understanding the difference is the key to understanding everything that follows. Start with type 1. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease, meaning the body's own immune system, which normally fights infections, mistakenly turns on the body and destroys the specific cells in the pancreas that make insulin. It wipes out the insulin factory. The result is that the person makes little or no insulin at all. And this is the most important thing to understand about type 1, it is not caused by eating too much sugar, by being overweight, or by anything the person did. It's an immune malfunction, the cause of which we still don't fully understand, and it often strikes in childhood or the teenage years, which is why it used to be called juvenile diabetes. A child with type 1 did nothing to cause it. That distinction matters enormously, and it's often gotten wrong. Type 2 is a completely different story. In type 2 diabetes, the pancreas can still make insulin, often plenty of it, at least at first. The problem is that the body's cells have become resistant to it. Remember the key and the lock. In type 2, the keys are there, but the locks have gotten stiff and stopped turning properly. This is called insulin resistance. To force enough glucose into the cells, the pancreas has to pump out more and more insulin to overcome the resistance. For a while, it keeps up. But over years, the overworked pancreas gradually wears out and can't produce enough to compensate, and blood sugar starts to climb. Type 2 is far more common, accounting for the large majority of all diabetes. It usually develops gradually in adults, though it's increasingly appearing in younger people too. Let's line up the differences side by side. Type 1 is autoimmune. The body makes essentially no insulin. It's not caused by lifestyle, it often starts young, and because there's no insulin at all, people with type 1 must take insulin every day to survive. It's not optional. Type 2 is about insulin resistance. The body makes insulin but can't use it well. It's linked to a mix of genetics and lifestyle factors, and it usually comes on gradually in adulthood. Type 2 is far more common, the vast majority of cases, while type 1 is roughly 5 to 10%. One more crucial point that reduces stigma: while type 2 is influenced by weight and lifestyle, genetics play a massive role, and plenty of people who do everything right still develop it. Both are serious conditions, and both are managed rather than cured, though, as we'll see, type 2 can sometimes go into remission. Understanding the difference isn't academic, it completely determines the treatment. Because people with type 1 make no insulin, they must replace it, every day, for life, carefully matching the dose to their food and activity. Their entire challenge is precise insulin dosing, and it's why the diabetes technology we'll cover later matters so much for them. Type 2 is different, and honestly more hopeful in its options. Because the body still makes insulin, the goal is to help that insulin work better, through weight loss, through drugs that reduce insulin resistance or boost the body's own insulin, and increasingly through the GLP-1 medicines everyone's talking about. Insulin is often a later step for type 2, not the first. So when you hear diabetes, always ask, which type? Because the answer changes everything. This is educational, not medical advice. Before type 2 diabetes arrives, there's a long, silent warning period called prediabetes, and enormous numbers of people have it without knowing. It's driven by the insulin resistance we mentioned last episode. The good news: prediabetes is the single best moment to intervene, because it's often reversible. This might be the most practically useful episode in the series. Let's understand the slide toward diabetes, and how to stop it. Let's go deeper on insulin resistance, because it's the root of so much. Normally, a little insulin efficiently ushers glucose into your cells. Insulin resistance means the cells have become sluggish and stop responding well, so the same amount of insulin now moves much less glucose. Here's the sneaky part, and why this hides for so long. The pancreas notices that blood sugar isn't dropping enough, so it simply makes more insulin to force the job done. And for years, that compensation works. Your blood sugar can look completely normal on a standard test, because behind the scenes your pancreas is quietly working overtime, pumping out 2, 3, 4 times the normal insulin to keep things in range. The disease is developing, but the usual number still looks fine. Insulin resistance is the hidden engine running underneath. Prediabetes is the stage where the pancreas finally starts losing that battle. It can't quite keep up anymore, so blood sugar creeps higher than normal, but not yet high enough to be called diabetes. It's the in-between zone, the on-ramp. How do doctors catch it? 2 simple blood tests. One is a fasting glucose test, your blood sugar first thing in the morning before eating. The other, and this one's really useful, is called the A1C. Instead of a single snapshot, the A1C reflects your average blood sugar over the past 2 to 3 months, because it measures how much glucose has stuck to your red blood cells over their lifespan. A slightly elevated A1C is one of the earliest, clearest warnings that you're on the prediabetes slide, while there's still plenty of time to act. Now, why should you care about a stage that doesn't even count as diabetes yet? 2 reasons. First, prediabetes is almost completely silent, no symptoms, nothing you'd feel, which is exactly why the majority of people who have it have no idea. It's astonishingly common, and most of it is undiagnosed. Second, it's not harmless waiting. Left alone, a large fraction of people with prediabetes go on to develop full type 2 diabetes within several years. And even before that, the insulin resistance and slightly high blood sugar are already quietly damaging blood vessels and raising the risk of heart disease. So prediabetes isn't nothing, it's the early, still reversible chapter of a serious disease. The tragedy is only that we so often miss the window. Here's the genuinely empowering part, and it's why I said this might be the most useful episode. Prediabetes is often reversible, you can get off the slide. Landmark studies have shown that losing a modest amount of weight, just 5 to 7% of your body weight, dramatically cuts the chance of progressing to diabetes. Regular physical activity makes your muscles more sensitive to insulin, sometimes within days. Exercise is almost like a drug for insulin resistance. Cutting back on refined carbohydrates and sugary drinks reduces the glucose load your system has to handle. And remarkably, in major prevention trials, intensive lifestyle change actually outperformed medication at preventing type 2 diabetes. Prediabetes is the body sounding an early alarm while the damage is still small and reversible. The whole point is to catch it and act, which starts with getting your blood sugar checked. So the takeaway is refreshingly actionable. Because prediabetes is silent and extremely common, the only way to know is to get tested, a simple A1C or fasting glucose check, especially if you're over 45, carry extra weight around the middle, or have a family history. And if you catch it, know that you've been handed one of the most reversible situations in all of medicine. Modest weight loss, regular movement, and cutting the sugary stuff can genuinely turn it around, prevent diabetes, and protect your heart at the same time. This is the stage where a small effort pays off enormously. Get your number, and if it's creeping up, act while acting still works. This is educational, not medical advice. Here's a hard truth that reframes the whole disease: high blood sugar itself usually doesn't feel like much day to day. What makes diabetes one of the most serious conditions in the world is the damage it does silently, over years, to blood vessels and nerves throughout the body. Understanding these complications is what makes the case for taking blood sugar seriously, because every one of them is largely preventable with good control. To understand the complications, you need one core mechanism. When blood sugar stays high for years, that excess glucose slowly damages the walls of your blood vessels, chemically injuring them and making them leaky and weak. It hits the tiniest, most delicate vessels hardest, and it damages the nerves those vessels feed. Now here's the key insight: because blood vessels reach literally every organ in your body, uncontrolled diabetes isn't a disease of one place, it's a disease of your entire circulatory system, which means it can harm almost everywhere. Doctors group the damage into a handful of classic targets, and once you see the pattern, the whole danger of diabetes clicks into place. Let's walk through them. The classic complications follow the blood vessels. The eyes: diabetes damages the tiny vessels in the retina, and it remains a leading cause of blindness in working-age adults. The kidneys: their job is filtering blood through millions of tiny vessels, so they're especially vulnerable, and diabetes is the #1 cause of kidney failure requiring dialysis. The nerves, called neuropathy: this causes numbness, burning pain, and tingling, classically starting in the feet. The feet themselves are a dangerous combination. Poor circulation means wounds heal slowly, and numbness means a person may not even feel a cut or blister, so small injuries can turn into serious infections and, tragically, amputations. And the biggest one of all, the heart and brain. Diabetes dramatically accelerates the artery clogging process, so heart attacks and strokes are actually the leading cause of death in people with diabetes. Let's dwell on the heart for a moment, because it's the most important and the most underappreciated. People tend to think of diabetes as a sugar problem, but its deadliest effect is on the cardiovascular system. Diabetes roughly doubles the risk of heart attack and stroke. The high sugar, along with the high blood pressure and abnormal cholesterol that so often travel with it, supercharges the atherosclerosis we covered in the cardiology series. This connection has completely reshaped modern diabetes treatment. It's no longer just about getting the blood sugar number down, it's about protecting the heart. And that's a big reason the newer diabetes drugs, the GLP-1s and others, have been such a breakthrough. They don't just lower sugar, they've been proven to reduce heart attacks, strokes, and kidney decline directly. Diabetes and heart disease are, in the end, two chapters of the same story. Now the hopeful flip side, because this episode isn't meant to frighten, it's meant to motivate. Every single one of these complications is dramatically reduced by good control over time. Keeping blood sugar in a healthy range, along with blood pressure and cholesterol, has been shown again and again to prevent or delay eye disease, kidney disease, nerve damage, and heart attacks. The damage comes from years of high sugar. Keep it controlled, and you largely avoid the damage. That's why people with diabetes get regular eye exams, kidney tests, and foot checks, to catch any early changes while they're still reversible or manageable. So the complications are the reason diabetes is serious, but they are not a foregone conclusion. Well-managed diabetes is compatible with a long, full, healthy life. Control is everything. This is educational, not medical advice. Before the GLP-1 drugs stole the spotlight, diabetes was managed with a toolkit built over a century, starting with one of the greatest discoveries in medical history, insulin. These classic drugs are still the backbone of treatment for millions. This episode covers the proven workhorses, how they work and who they're for, so that when we get to the new drugs next time, you'll understand exactly what they improved on. We have to start with insulin, because its story is one of the most dramatic in all of medicine. Before insulin was isolated in the early 1920s, a diagnosis of type 1 diabetes was essentially a death sentence. Children wasted away within months. Then researchers extracted insulin, injected it, and patients on the edge of death recovered almost overnight. It remains one of the great miracles of modern science. For people with type 1 diabetes, insulin is not a choice. It directly replaces the hormone their body can no longer make, and they need it to live. Modern insulin comes in cleverly engineered versions, rapid-acting ones taken with meals to handle the glucose spike, and long-acting ones that provide a slow, steady background level all day. The whole art is matching the dose to the food and activity, which, as we'll see, technology is making easier. For type 2 diabetes, the story usually begins with a different drug, metformin. If you know one diabetes pill, know this one. It's been the first-line treatment for decades, and for good reason. It's remarkably cheap, it has a long track record of safety, and it works well. Metformin's main trick is telling the liver to stop dumping so much extra glucose into the blood, because in type 2, the liver often overproduces glucose. It also modestly helps the body's cells respond better to insulin. It doesn't cause the dangerous low blood sugars that some other drugs can, and it's weight neutral, which is a plus. For a huge number of people with type 2 diabetes, metformin plus lifestyle changes is enough to control things for years. It's the unglamorous, reliable foundation that everything else builds on. Beyond metformin, a few other classes fill out the classic toolkit. Sulfonylureas are old, cheap drugs that squeeze the pancreas to release more insulin, effective, but they can cause low blood sugar and some weight gain, so they've fallen a bit out of favor. Then there's a genuinely important newer class, the SGLT2 inhibitors. These work in a clever way. They make the kidneys dump excess glucose out of the body in the urine, lowering blood sugar through a completely different route. And, echoing our cardiology and heart failure episodes, they turned out to strongly protect the heart and kidneys, which is why they've become so important. There are also DPP-4 inhibitors, which gently boost the body's own gut hormones, a mechanism closely related to the GLP-1 drugs we'll cover next, and older drugs that directly target insulin resistance. A whole menu, each with a different angle. So how does a doctor actually build a treatment plan from all this? For type 2, it's usually stepwise. Start with lifestyle changes and metformin. If blood sugar is still high, or if the person has heart disease or kidney disease, add a second drug chosen for that specific situation, often an SGLT2 inhibitor or a GLP-1 for their heart and kidney protection. The choice is increasingly personalized, based not just on the sugar number but on the whole person, their weight, their heart risk, their kidneys. And if, over the years, the pancreas finally can't keep up, insulin gets added to the type 2 plan too. The key idea is that this is a layered, individualized toolkit, built up over a century, and it works. Next episode, we get to the drugs that changed the game. This is educational, not medical advice. Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound. In just a few years, the GLP-1 drugs have become the biggest story in medicine, reshaping how we treat diabetes and obesity, and becoming a genuine cultural phenomenon. But most of the coverage is hype or fear. So let's do the real explainer. what these drugs actually are, how they work, and why doctors are genuinely excited, and appropriately cautious. Let's demystify the name first. GLP-1 is a hormone your own gut naturally releases every time you eat. It has two main jobs. It tells your pancreas to release insulin, helping manage the incoming glucose, which is why it helps diabetes. And it acts on your brain, in the centers that control appetite, to tell you that you're full and satisfied. The problem is that your natural GLP-1 breaks down within minutes. The breakthrough was engineering a version of this hormone that lasts for a whole week, and delivering it as a once-weekly injection. So these drugs, semaglutide is the ingredient in Ozempic and Wegovy, essentially give your body a strong, steady, all-week version of that natural after-eating signal. Suddenly the brain feels full sooner, and stays satisfied longer. That's the core of it. Why have these drugs caused such a stir? Because they work, on two fronts at once. For type 2 diabetes, they lower blood sugar powerfully, and because of how they work, with little risk of the dangerous low blood sugars that insulin and some older drugs can cause. But it was the effect on weight that stunned everyone. By quieting appetite and what many patients describe as the constant food noise in their heads, people simply eat less, not through a grinding battle of willpower, but because the biological drive to overeat is turned down. The weight loss has been dramatic. Semaglutide produces around 15% of body weight on average, and the newer dual-hormone drug tirzepatide, that's Mounjaro and Zepbound, reaches around 21%. To put that in perspective, that approaches the results that previously required bariatric surgery. This was a genuine paradigm shift in treating obesity. And then the story got even bigger. Major clinical trials showed these drugs do more than lower sugar and weight, they protect the body directly. A landmark trial called SELECT showed that semaglutide significantly reduced heart attacks and strokes in people with obesity and heart disease, even those without diabetes. Other trials showed they slow the progression of kidney disease. This was huge, because it reframed the entire class. These aren't just diabetes drugs, or weight loss drugs, they're medicines proven to prevent the cardiovascular and kidney complications that actually kill people, tying right back to our cardiology series. That's why regulators have approved them specifically for heart protection and kidney protection, not only for blood sugar. The benefits reach well beyond the number on the scale. Now the honest caveats, because responsible coverage requires them. These drugs are not free of downsides. The most common side effects are gastrointestinal, nausea, and other gut symptoms, especially when starting or increasing the dose, and they lead some people to stop. There's the question of duration. For many people, these appear to be long-term medications, because when you stop, the appetite and often the weight tend to return. This treats the condition, it doesn't cure it. There's cost and access, they're expensive, and insurance coverage is inconsistent and contentious. And there's perspective, they are a powerful tool, not a magic bullet. They work best combined with better eating and activity, and they raise real, unsettled questions about muscle loss, about treating children, and about what it means to medicate a condition this common. Miraculous and complicated, both at once. So the balanced takeaway. The GLP-1 drugs are a genuine breakthrough, arguably the biggest advance in metabolic medicine in decades, with proven benefits for blood sugar, weight, the heart, and the kidneys. The excitement is largely earned. But they are serious medicines, for medical conditions, with real side effects, real costs, and open questions, not a casual lifestyle shortcut to grab without thought. They belong in the hands of a doctor who can weigh them for the individual. If you take away one thing, let it be this: obesity and diabetes are biological conditions, not moral failings, and for the first time we have medicines that treat the underlying biology powerfully. That's real progress, and it deserves to be understood clearly rather than through hype. This is educational, not medical advice. Obesity is one of the most misunderstood and stigmatized conditions in medicine. For decades it was treated as a simple failure of willpower: eat less, move more, and if you can't, that's on you. The science tells a very different and more compassionate story. Understanding obesity as a disease of biology, not character, is essential, both for treating it and for how we treat the people who have it. Let's set the record straight. Here's the piece almost everyone misses. Your body actively regulates and defends your weight, much like it defends your temperature. Your brain has something like a set point, a weight it considers normal for you, and it uses a web of hormones controlling hunger and metabolism to keep you there. And here's the cruel part, this system defends against weight loss far more aggressively than against weight gain. When you lose weight by dieting, your body perceives a threat. It ramps up hunger hormones, so you feel hungrier, and it slows your metabolism, so you burn fewer calories. In other words, the body actively fights to regain the lost weight, and it can keep fighting for years. This is why the vast majority of diets fail long-term. It's not weakness or lack of discipline. It's powerful biology working exactly as designed, against the person trying to lose weight. Obesity also isn't caused by any one thing, which is another reason the willpower framing fails. Genetics play a huge role. Studies of twins and families show that a large share of the difference in body weight between people is inherited. Some people's biology simply defends a higher weight and fights harder to keep it. On top of genetics, layer the modern environment. We're surrounded by cheap, abundant, cleverly engineered food designed to be as irresistible and calorie-dense as possible, and it's marketed relentlessly. Add in poor sleep, chronic stress, certain hormones, and even some medications that promote weight gain, and you have a genuinely multifactorial disease. Blaming the individual ignores the genetics they didn't choose and the environment engineered around them. The science is clear that this is complex biology meeting a challenging environment, not a simple matter of trying harder. So why does it matter whether we call obesity a disease? Two big reasons. First, it's simply accurate. Major medical organizations now formally recognize obesity as a chronic disease, because it has identifiable biological mechanisms, it's driven by genetics and hormones, and it causes other diseases like diabetes, heart disease, and certain cancers. Second, and just as important, the framing changes everything about how we respond. When obesity is seen as a personal failing, the only prescription is shame, and shame doesn't work, it just harms people and drives them away from care. When it's understood as a medical condition, it becomes something we can actually treat with medicine, with surgery, and with structured support, the way we treat high blood pressure or diabetes without moralizing. That shift, from blame to biology, is genuinely improving both the treatment and the humanity of care. The takeaway ties this whole series together. The GLP-1 drugs from last episode are, in a way, the proof of this entire argument. By acting directly on the brain's appetite biology, the very system that defends the set point, they accomplish what sheer willpower almost never could, sustainably. That's powerful evidence that obesity was a biological problem all along, waiting for a biological treatment. None of this means lifestyle doesn't matter, it deeply does, as we'll cover next episode. But it means we should approach obesity, and people living with it, the way we approach any other chronic disease, with understanding, with real medical tools, and without blame. Treat the biology, drop the shame. That's both better science and better medicine. This is educational, not medical advice. No topic in health is buried under more noise, fads, and outright nonsense than diet. Keto, fasting, carnivore, this superfood, that toxin, everyone's selling something. So this episode strips it back to what the evidence actually supports for metabolic health. It won't be flashy, and that's the point. The honest version of diet and lifestyle is simpler, and more freeing, than the internet wants you to believe. Let's start with what almost every serious nutrition expert actually agrees on, underneath the shouting. Eat mostly whole, minimally processed foods, vegetables, fruits, beans and legumes, whole grains, nuts, and decent protein. That's it. That's the foundation, and it's remarkably boring precisely because it's not controversial. On the other side, the single clearest villain in metabolic disease isn't any one nutrient, it's ultra-processed food and sugary drinks. These are engineered to be hyperpalatable and calorie-dense, they spike blood sugar, and they're easy to overeat. Sugary drinks in particular deliver a flood of sugar with zero fullness, so they're a uniquely bad deal. If you did nothing else but shift toward whole foods and cut way back on ultra-processed products and sugary drinks, you'd capture the great majority of the benefit. Everything else is fine-tuning. Now, the diet wars, keto versus Mediterranean versus plant-based versus fasting. Here's the honest answer that won't sell any books. For most people, they work about equally well, and the best diet is simply the healthy one you can actually stick to. When you look at the studies, most of these approaches produce broadly similar results, and they largely work through the same underlying mechanism, they get you to cut ultra-processed food and eat somewhat fewer calories, whether by limiting carbs, limiting eating windows, or filling up on plants and fiber. The specific label matters far less than the adherence. Some people thrive on lower carb, some on Mediterranean, some on time-restricted eating, and that's fine. The winning diet is the sustainable one that fits your life and your preferences, not the one with the best marketing. That's genuinely freeing once you accept it. Metabolic health isn't only about food, and the other levers are badly underrated. Exercise is powerful, and here's the underrated part, it's not mainly about burning calories. Muscle is metabolically active tissue that soaks up glucose from the blood and fights insulin resistance directly. Building muscle through strength training is like installing a bigger, more efficient engine for handling blood sugar. It may be the most underrated metabolic tool there is. Sleep matters more than people think. Even a few nights of poor sleep raises hunger hormones and worsens blood sugar control the very next day. And chronic stress drives up the hormone cortisol, which raises blood sugar and encourages fat storage around the belly. So the full picture is food, movement, muscle, sleep, and stress, a handful of levers that work together. You don't have to be perfect at all of them, small, consistent improvements across several compound powerfully. So here's the honest takeaway, and it's a relief. The evidence-based version of eating and living well for your metabolism is genuinely simple, mostly whole foods, much less ultra-processed junk and sugary drinks, regular movement with some strength training, decent sleep, and managing stress. You don't need a guru, a cleanse, a forbidden food list, or an expensive supplement. And crucially, consistency beats perfection. The imperfect plan you actually follow for years will always beat the optimal one you abandon in 3 weeks. Build habits you can live with, be kind to yourself about the slip-ups, and let them compound. One more thing worth saying, for some people, especially with strong genetics or established disease, lifestyle alone isn't enough, and that's exactly why the medicines exist. Lifestyle and medicine aren't rivals, they're teammates. This is educational, not medical advice. Metabolic syndrome isn't a single disease, it's a cluster of risk factors that tend to travel together, and together they add up to something far more dangerous than any one alone. It's incredibly common, often silent, and it's the crossroads where diabetes and heart disease meet. If you understand this one concept, a huge amount of chronic disease suddenly makes sense. Let's unpack the cluster. So what exactly is it? Metabolic syndrome is the name for a specific cluster of 5 risk factors that often occur together. Number 1, and the most visible, is a large waistline, excess fat carried around the middle, around the organs. Number 2, high blood pressure. Number 3, high blood sugar, the prediabetes we discussed. Number 4, high triglycerides, a type of fat in the blood. And number 5, low HDL, the protective good cholesterol. When someone has 3 or more of these 5 at once, they're diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. The key idea is that it's not 5 random problems, it's a pattern, a signal that the body's whole metabolism has gone off the rails. And it's astonishingly common, affecting something like 1/3 of adults in many countries, often without them knowing. Why do these 5 things cluster together? Because they mostly share a common root, and by now you can probably guess it. Insulin resistance, often centered on a particular kind of fat. Not all body fat is equal. The fat stored just under the skin is relatively harmless. But the fat packed deep in the abdomen, around your liver and other organs, called visceral fat, is a different beast entirely. Visceral fat is metabolically active, almost like a rogue organ. It pumps out inflammatory substances and free fatty acids that drive insulin resistance, push blood pressure up, raise triglycerides, and disturb blood sugar. So that expanding waistline isn't just cosmetic, it's often a visible marker of the dangerous internal fat that's driving the entire cluster. That's why waist size, more than overall weight, is such a useful warning sign. Here's why doctors take the cluster so seriously. Each of those 5 factors is a risk on its own. But when they combine, the danger doesn't just add up, it multiplies. Someone with metabolic syndrome has a sharply elevated risk of developing type 2 diabetes, and a greatly increased risk of heart attack and stroke. In effect, metabolic syndrome is the shared launchpad for the 2 biggest chronic disease epidemics of our time. It ties this entire series to the cardiology series in one neat package. The same underlying metabolic dysfunction feeds both diabetes and heart disease. Which is also why looking at just one number in isolation can be misleading. A doctor who spots the whole pattern, the waist, the pressure, the sugar, the lipids together, sees a person whose entire system needs attention, and who has the most to gain from acting. And here's the genuinely hopeful takeaway. Because the 5 factors share a common root, they also share a common solution. You don't have to fight each one separately. Losing visceral fat, through exactly the lifestyle changes we covered last episode, plus medication when needed, tends to improve all 5 at once. Lose the belly fat, and the blood pressure, blood sugar, triglycerides, and good cholesterol all tend to move in the right direction together, because you've addressed the thing driving them all. That's why tackling metabolic syndrome early is one of the highest leverage moves in all of preventive medicine. One focused effort protects you against both diabetes and heart disease simultaneously. So it's worth knowing your waist, your blood pressure, your blood sugar, and your cholesterol, and seeing them as one connected picture. This is educational, not medical advice. For people with diabetes, especially type 1, daily life used to mean painful finger prick tests and guesswork with insulin. Technology has transformed that, and it's now approaching a genuine holy grail, an artificial pancreas that manages blood sugar automatically. This is one of the most hopeful and fast-moving corners of metabolic medicine, and it connects directly to the AI and sensor themes this channel is about. Let's look at the tech. The first revolution is the continuous glucose monitor, or CGM. For decades, checking blood sugar meant pricking your finger for a drop of blood, several times a day, painful, and just a single snapshot each time. A CGM changes everything. It's a small sensor, worn painlessly on the arm or abdomen for a couple of weeks at a time, with a tiny filament under the skin that measures your glucose every few minutes and beams it straight to your phone or a small reader. No finger pricks. And it doesn't just give you a number, it gives you a continuous trend line, so you can actually see your blood sugar rising after a meal or drifting down before you go low, and get an alarm before it becomes dangerous. Modern sensors like the leading ones are highly accurate and need no calibration. Seeing your glucose in real time is genuinely life-changing for managing the disease. The second piece of the puzzle is the insulin pump. Instead of taking multiple separate injections throughout the day, a person wears a small pump, some the size of a pager, some a tiny patch stuck right to the skin, that delivers insulin continuously through a thin tube or cannula sitting just under the skin. The pump does 2 things elegantly. It provides a steady, precise background trickle of insulin all day and night, mimicking what a healthy pancreas does between meals. And at mealtimes, the user tells it to deliver an extra dose to cover the food. This is far more precise and flexible than injections, allowing fine-tuned adjustments that better match real life. On its own, a pump still requires the user to make the decisions. But combine the pump with the continuous glucose monitor, and something remarkable becomes possible. This is where it gets genuinely futuristic. Connect the continuous glucose monitor and the insulin pump together, and put a smart control algorithm in charge, and you get what's called a closed-loop system, or an artificial pancreas. Here's the loop: the sensor reads glucose every few minutes, the algorithm decides exactly how much insulin is needed right now, and the pump delivers it automatically, over and over, around the clock, without the person having to intervene for every decision. It's automated insulin delivery, and it works. These systems now keep blood sugar in the target range far more of the time, with much less of the dangerous lows, and they take an enormous mental burden off people who otherwise make dozens of calculations a day. As of the mid-2020s, several of these systems are approved and are becoming the recommended standard of care for type 1, and increasingly for insulin-treated type 2. The takeaway is that diabetes technology has quietly become one of medicine's real success stories, turning a relentless, manual, painful daily task into something increasingly automated, accurate, and livable. And it keeps advancing. The newest systems are moving toward being fully hands-off, where you don't even have to tell the system about your meals, the algorithm handles it. Sensors are getting longer-lasting, including implantable ones that can run for a year. And these tools increasingly use the same kind of smart algorithms and continuous data that this whole channel explores in medicine and AI. For people living with diabetes, the direction is unmistakably good: less burden, better control, and fewer complications down the road. The artificial pancreas, once a distant dream, is essentially here. This is educational, not medical advice. For decades, type 2 diabetes was taught as a lifelong, one-way, progressive disease. You could slow it, but never turn it back. That belief has been overturned. We now know that type 2 diabetes can, in many cases, be pushed into remission. This is genuinely hopeful news, but it comes with important caveats and asterisks. So let's answer the question carefully and honestly: can type 2 diabetes really be reversed? First, let's get the word right, because it matters. Doctors don't usually say cured, they say remission. Remission means a person's blood sugar has returned to a normal, non-diabetic range, and stayed there, without needing diabetes medication. That's a huge deal, and it's very real. But it's called remission rather than cure for an important reason: the underlying susceptibility doesn't fully vanish. The person still has the genetics and the tendency toward it, so if the conditions that caused it return, particularly weight regain, the diabetes can come back. Think of it the way we talk about remission in other chronic diseases: the disease is controlled and inactive, which is wonderful, but it requires ongoing maintenance to stay that way. So the honest headline is, reversal, in the sense of durable remission, is achievable for many people, but it's a state you maintain, not a door you close forever. So how does remission actually happen? The breakthrough understanding centers on fat in the wrong places, specifically, fat clogging up the liver and the pancreas. The theory, supported by landmark research, is that in many people type 2 diabetes is driven by excess fat inside these two organs, which stops the pancreas from releasing insulin properly and makes the liver overproduce glucose. And crucially, that organ fat can be reversed. In major studies, people who lost a substantial amount of weight, often through an intensive, supervised low-calorie program, cleared that fat out of the liver and pancreas, and a large share saw their type 2 diabetes go into remission, with blood sugar returning to normal off all medication. Two clear patterns emerged: the more weight a person lost, the higher their odds of remission, and the earlier in the disease they did it, the better it worked, before the pancreas was too worn out. There are a few real routes to remission. The first is intensive lifestyle change, structured, often medically supervised low-calorie programs designed to produce significant weight loss, then careful maintenance. It takes real commitment, but it works for a meaningful share of people. The second, and the most powerful, is bariatric surgery, weight loss surgery. It's remarkable, many people see their type 2 diabetes improve dramatically or vanish within days of surgery, sometimes even before major weight loss, through effects on gut hormones. It's a bigger step, but for the right person it can be transformative. And a newer, third route is emerging: the GLP-1 drugs. By driving major, sustained weight loss, they're opening a medication-assisted path toward remission for people who couldn't achieve it by lifestyle alone. The common thread across all three is the same: substantial, sustained weight loss is the engine of remission. So, the honest takeaway. The old belief that type 2 diabetes is always permanent and only ever gets worse is simply wrong, and that's genuinely liberating news for millions of people. Remission is a real, achievable, evidence-based goal, particularly when pursued early, before the disease is long established. But keep the caveats in view: it usually requires substantial, sustained weight loss and real ongoing maintenance to hold. It's not guaranteed for everyone, and the chances fade the longer the disease has been present. This is also very much a journey to take with a medical team, not a solo experiment, especially since medications need careful adjustment as blood sugar improves. The bottom line is hopeful and empowering: for many people, type 2 diabetes can be turned around. It's worth asking your doctor whether remission is a realistic goal for you. This is educational, not medical advice. We'll close this series by looking ahead, and there may be no faster-moving field in all of medicine right now than metabolic health. The GLP-1 breakthrough kicked off a wave of innovation that is still accelerating, with more powerful drugs, simpler pills, and smarter technology arriving fast. Let's look at what's coming, and how it might reshape two of the biggest health challenges of our time. And it ties right back to what this channel is about. Start with the drugs, because the pace is staggering. The first GLP-1 drugs targeted one gut hormone. Then came tirzepatide, which hits two hormones at once and pushed average weight loss higher. And now, in trials, triple hormone drugs like retatrutide target three pathways together and have produced even larger weight loss, the kind of numbers that were unimaginable from a medication just a few years ago. You can see the escalator clearly: roughly 15% of body weight with single hormone semaglutide, around 21% with dual hormone tirzepatide, and higher still with the triple agonists in development. Each new drug engages more of the body's appetite and metabolism signals simultaneously. The frontier is combination approaches that not only take fat off, but do it while preserving muscle, one of the key open challenges researchers are racing to solve. The second big shift is from injections to pills, and it matters more than it might sound. Most of these drugs have required a weekly injection, which puts some people off and limits how widely they can scale. That's changing fast. The first oral versions for weight loss have now been approved, and a new generation of small molecule pills, which are far cheaper and easier to manufacture at massive scale than the injectables, is in late-stage testing. Why does this matter so much? Access. A cheap, once-a-day pill that's easy to make and doesn't involve needles could put these treatments within reach of vastly more people, in far more places, than the expensive injections ever could. Turning a breakthrough that's currently limited by cost and supply into something genuinely global is one of the most important stories to watch. The third frontier is intelligence and personalization, and this is where it connects directly to this channel's core theme of AI in medicine. The continuous glucose monitors we covered aren't just for diabetics anymore, they're increasingly used by people simply wanting to understand how their own body responds to different foods, in real time. Combine that flood of continuous data with artificial intelligence, and you get the vision taking shape, care tailored to each person's unique biology, rather than one-size-fits-all advice. Imagine models that predict who's sliding toward diabetes years in advance, that personalize exactly which diet and which drug will work best for a given individual, and that catch metabolic disease at its earliest, most reversible stage. The direction is a shift from reacting to full-blown disease, toward predicting and preventing it, proactively, and personally. That's the same predict and prevent arc we've seen across this whole channel. So here's the series in one closing thought. Metabolic medicine is arguably in the most exciting era it has ever seen, more powerful drugs, needle-free pills, and intelligent, personalized, preventive care all arriving at once and genuinely reshaping what's possible for diabetes and obesity. But notice that all of it still rests on the fundamentals we spent this series building. Understand how your blood sugar and metabolism work. Know your numbers, your A1C, your waist, your blood pressure. Act early, when things are still reversible. And treat obesity and diabetes as the biological conditions they are, with real tools and without shame. The dazzling new science doesn't make those basics obsolete, it makes them more powerful than ever. Thank you for watching this series on metabolic health. Take care of that remarkable fuel system. And as always, this is educational, not medical advice.